This is Good Morning San Diego.
The trial for former President Donald Trump's hush money case is set for April 15th. A New York judge set the date for that trial on Monday afternoon. The case is tied to hush money paid to a porn star during his 2016 campaign. The new trial date paves the way for the Republican presidential candidate to be either convicted or cleared before the November 5th election. And a New York court also agreed to hold off collection of former President Donald Trump's $454 million civil fraud judgment. If he puts up $175 million within 10 days, that will start the appeal process. If Trump does, it will stop the clock on collection and prevent the state from trying to seize his assets while he appeals the ruling. The development came just before New York Attorney General Leticia James was expected to initiate efforts to collect the judgment. In fact, she was very vocal about that on all her social media platforms, almost gleeful, if you will. Joining us now to talk about the latest in the court battles is defense attorney and friend of KUSI, Vikas Bajaj. Vic, welcome back to KUSI. Thank you so much. Which one do you want to start with?
It's really up to you. They're kind of this different peas in the same pod.
Well, let's start with the Stormy Daniels one then.
Yes.
Because first of all, the 34 counts, if he had just written one check, it would be one count. So I mean, it was 34 payments over a period of time. What is the exact law that he broke in doing that?
Well, it's a hybrid between non-disclosure, fraud to the government, and campaign finance. What they've done, the prosecution that is they've taken certain payments, they've reclassified them as you would expect an accountant, a CPA, an IRS auditor to do, and say, well, it shouldn't have been in this compartment, it should have been in that compartment, therefore there's a fraud, again, with no victim, and that's their allegation.
So he took money out of his own accounts, put it into his campaign, then paid Stormy Daniels to keep quiet, basically, hush money. You know, she signed a non-disclosure, which she broke, right?
Right.
Yeah, but no one's talking about that. But so and then he filled out the wrong paperwork in classifying the money.
Well, I mean, that's one way of looking at it. We don't have the actual details on where the money actually came from yet. We know that Cohen, his former attorney, who's been a convicted felon now, served his time, and last week a federal judge says, hey, you know what, I just can't believe what you're saying. As Judge Mudd in our jurisdiction, God rest his soul, used to say, he may have the credibility of a turnip. And that's essentially what the federal court said. But this is the government on the state side reclassifying payments that Trump made to put them into a compartment of campaign money and financing because it eventually helped his campaign for the presidency.
Okay, so then we have that one going on, that trial, that's the Alvin Bragg deal. That one's set to begin in April.
Well, it's set to begin in April, but they just dumped hundreds and thousands of pages of discovery, which is all the evidence the defense needs to prepare for trial.
And Trump wants 90 days to review what is like 10,000 documents, and apparently he's not going to get the 90 days, he's going to get 30?
Well, he'll get 30, and you can bet your bottom dollar there'll be another petition to have a continuance so they can adequately be prepared,
so
and
he'll
get the
slow
time.
walk that as best they can.
They need to be prepared, and I think that's the right option.
All right, fair enough. So you got that on one side of the fence. Now let's go to the other side of the fence. The appellate court cutting the bond postman by more than half to 100. What do you read into that?
I wasn't surprised by the action the appellate division took. However, I was surprised by the magnitude of the deduction. Please understand that state court judges throughout the states in the United States of America are, for the most part, elected, or they're appointed by people with one political affiliation or another. So in New York, you have really a foundation of, let's say, liberal or Democrat judges, then the appellate division, then the Supreme Court. It's not only until you get into appellate courts, federal courts, that you may have some sense of an unbiased recollection and interpretation of the law. The surprise for some people in this case is it was the New York Appellate Division that said, hey, there's no relation to the actual allegation of a fraud. Let's make it more reasonable and reduce it by, almost 60% thereabouts. So that was a surprise for some people. I wasn't surprised by it, and I don't think this is the end of the appellate courts being involved in this case. This is but one emergency request, and during the pendency of this case, Paul, we may have half a dozen.
If you're the AG, are you worried?
If I was the AG, I would probably say, hey, you know what, this may not be a case that I want to hang my hat on. Not only would I have not brought the case and worked out a civil resolution, which is what district attorneys and attorney generals throughout the United States of America always do when there's really not a victim and there's no history of criminality. We work out a civil disposition. I would jump off this ship quickly, perhaps save some face and let this case go.
Well, yeah, because the Eighth Amendment's going to come. I mean, Bernie Madoff, his bond was $10 million, and I believe there were a lot of victims in that case, were there not?
That's exactly right. But please don't get confused. All of our listeners and watchers need to understand something. When we talk about criminal law, a bond secures a person's ability to appear in court and not flee. A civil bond, which is what we have, is enough to show the court that there's money to be paid and the appellate action is not just in word only.
I'm comparing apples and oranges. It doesn't work.
That's right. Okay. It's a different animal.
All right. So how does this play? Just quickly as we wrap this up, how are both going to play out?
There's a lot of litigation going on, Paul. There's a tremendous amount of litigation that we know about when it hits the news with a judicial ruling, and a lot of litigation that we don't hear about, such as discovery requests, requests for more information to be given. I am, again, hard-pressed to believe that we're going to see a trial in any way, shape, or form see the light of day before the election.
Either side of the fence, both those cases.
That's my assumption, yes, sir.
All right, Vic, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be discussing this in greater detail in the weeks, months, and perhaps years ahead.